So Francesca, I think you can validate a quorum likely.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum.
We do have a quorum, excellent. And I do show 12:30, so I believe we can go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the Audit Committee meeting, Friday, February 10th, 2023. I'd like to start off by introducing our translator with the translation services, Grisel Villafana, and could you please instruct folks on how to access the translation services?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, of course. I'm going to repeat the following message in English. Este es un aviso por parte del intérprete para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación. Por favor, vaya a la parte inferior en su pantalla de Zoom. Ahí aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, es un globo terráqueo, y seleccione español o Spanish. Si está en su aplicación móvil, desde celular o tableta, presione los puntos para después presionar Interpretation o interpretación y el idioma. Si está en la reunión en la sala de juntas de Sandag y necesita interpretación, vaya a la recepción del piso 7 y solicite un receptor. Se parece a un pequeño iPod y puede utilizar para escuchar la reunión en español. Solo sostenga el auricular junto a su oído y la interpretación comenzará automáticamente. To use the Zoom interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon that appears as a world or a globe and select either English or Spanish. If you are joining using the Zoom mobile app, please press the ellipsis and then interpretation. If you're joining us today at Sandag and need interpretation into Spanish, please check out a headset from the receptionist on the 7th floor. It looks like a little iPod and comes with an earpiece which you can use to hear the meeting in Spanish. Simply hold the earpiece and the interpreter will come on automatically. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, please join me in the pledge. Ready to begin?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes. Francesca, do we have any public comments on the meeting minutes?
No, Chair, no public comments.
Any board member comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mayor Vasquez. Do I have a second? Second by Board Member Munson. Could you please call for the vote? Are we voting with our pucks? Sorry. Yes. So remember, 1 means yes, 2 means no, 3 means abstain. And that motion passed unanimously. That brings us to item number 2, which is public comments and member comments. Francesca, do we have any non-agenda public comments?
No, Chair, we do not have any public comments.
That's different. Any board member comments they would like to make? I will go ahead and make one comment, which was this morning, there was an executive committee meeting which 2 topics were broached. One of them we'll save for the next item, but the other one was just our recommended changes to board policy 39. So it was heard at the executive committee meeting. There were a few questions asked by the chair, and then she asked for staff to go look up some information and confirm and check just with the recommended changes and the compliance with AB 805 and other things that are driving the agency, and to bring it back to the executive committee meeting. I believe it will be the next meeting, but I'm not sure. So that was the outcome of that particular item, which was presented, and I did present all of the recommendations that we had gone forth with, and thanks to Stuart for some of the information, because I was able to use some of the information that we had as well as in that presentation. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 3, which is, sorry, Stuart, yeah.
So I'm curious, just from a process perspective, maybe Amberlynn could fill us in. I'm just curious that if we made a recommendation to the board, would council's office let a recommendation to the board going through the executive committee, whatever the process, go through unvetted for compliance purposes?
The recommendation that went to the audit committee today was exactly what, or excuse me, to the executive committee today was exactly what the audit committee recommended. The request from the executive committee was to, among other things, there was quite a few items, which I'm sure Chair Zito will touch on in the next item. But one of those items included a thorough analysis of the impacts of the board policy 39 amendments. So I don't know that it was specifically for legal compliance. It was a bit more comprehensive than that.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, if I could, and I appreciate the indulgence here, I heard you in effect say that the recommendation goes to the board unvetted for compliance purposes, and it's only because a board member actually asked you to look into it further that you're actually going to undertake the exercise of reviewing for compliance purposes. So I would suggest, if I'm accurate, that procedurally that seems to be a little bit of a hole in our governance process. And it strikes me that a better practice would be that whether this committee or somebody else makes a recommendation before it actually goes to the board or executive committee, that it be vetted so that people don't actually end up spending time at the board level and perhaps, you know, unknowingly approve something that actually had not been vetted from a compliance standpoint. Does this issue that I'm raising make any sense to people?
Yeah, I think it makes sense, Stuart, and appreciate the comments. I would just, I think in this particular instance, there was a little bit of, you know, self-infliction, which was the, just, you know, I'm assuming there was nothing flagrant, and that's how we made it as far as we did. There was definitely not a deep, thorough analysis done, which is what is being asked for now. But if you recall last November, the recommendation at that point in time from the chair of the board was that staff not work on this further until there was actually board approval to do more work on this. So I think relative to many things that may have come forward, there was less time spent on it because that was the guidance from the chair at that point in time. So that needs to be rectified now is what they're asking for. Okay. Yeah. So with that, we can go on, move on to the agency report, and we have the amazing Ray Major to give that to us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair Zito. Good afternoon, audit committee members. The staff continues to work on the regional plan amendment to remove the road usage charge from the 2021 plan. We've been working on that over the past few months, and we are on track to bring that back to the board sometime in the summertime. And then at that point, it goes to the state, and it'll be up to the state to decide what we do at that point. We are also beginning to work on the 2025 regional plan in a parallel path because we need the time to do that. We're moving forward, also just moving over to the Del Mar Bluffs. The good news is that all of the work that we did to stabilize the bluffs in the past helped through the recent storms, but you can see that there's still a lot of issues with erosion. And so we need to move the tracks off the bluffs. That remains an urgent project that the agency is working on, and it's critical that we work together as one region to really advance that project. And then we also continue to move our discussions forward about the state and federal partners as it relates to Otay Mesa East Port of Entry, and we're making some good progress on that particular project. The planning is also underway for both the Blue Line expansion and the Purple Line projects. And the board recently authorized Sandag to advance our smart corridors projects by moving forward with 3 different projects through the request for innovative concepts. And we're going to be working with Caltrans to pick one of those and to do an advanced pilot sometime later this year. And lastly, the board adopted a Vision Zero resolution, which is a major step forward. San Diego received $2.5 million for safe streets and roads for all federal grant, and we're starting to put that in place as a regional comprehensive safety action plan. And Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ray. Francesca, do we have any public comments on the agency report?
Thank you, Chair. We have no public comments.
Great. Any board member comments or questions on the agency report? Thank you, too. I will just make a brief comment, Ray, since you brought up Vision Zero, that at the Transportation Committee meeting which you may recall, I did also make a request that since we had, every year we go through this business of approving federal targets safety targets for the purpose of our federal funds, that we actually in Vision Zero start coming up with our own metrics for safety targets for the non-motorized, the bicycle, pedestrian stuff, because I think for those who don't know, the good news that came out of that is we consistently perform in all the safety measures better than the rest of the state on average. So that's good. But then we continue to adopt the state targets for our targets. And I think for bike and ped stuff, if we're going to say Vision Zero, we need to be more aggressive in our bike and ped safety targets. So I put that in also as part of the Transportation Committee meeting. So thank you for that. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to item number 4, is update from the OIPA, and we have the pleasure of hearing from Lloyd today on this, since Mary Kay is taking her well-deserved vacation.
Thank you, Chair Zito and members of the committee. I just got a brief update. The contract and procurement audit part 2 is nearing its completion. I'm making sure that staff is supporting, looking at those thousands of documents that, that it's supporting the statements we're making in the draft report. We should have the draft report to the IPA by the end of this month, giving her ample time to review the draft report and then hopefully provide the management provide the management the draft report for a response. And with that, possibly come to the audit committee by April, the audit committee for April. That'd be it.
Okay, great, thanks. And so everything is still on, as of the latest update, it's still staying on track then?
Everything's on track so far. I just want to, the one thing I want to make sure is basically that every statement we make is fully supported. And so
we all
therefore,
appreciate that, yes. I wish that could be said of every statement made to the press. Not by this group, by board members.
Ours is through documents, so it's fine.
I appreciate that. Okay, Francesca, any public member?
No, Chair, no public comments
Thank
on
you.
this item.
Any board member comments, questions?
I do have one quick question. I know last time when Mary gave the update on this audit, she did point out that, there were some concerns about not necessarily always have the right documentation to ascertain, if there are issues or not. Are you still seeing the same?
We're having a little bit of delays on some documentation we requested for, but for the most part, we got the documents, whether whether what we're looking at supported or not supported, we can say it's not supported or not supported, but there are still some documents we're hoping to get, but if not, we'll find other ways on how to present it. Again, there's still a little delay in document requests.
Yeah, thank you. And, just for clarification, I mean, it's just a matter of you aren't finding any obstructions to your exploration. You're just finding obstacles that are organizational or logistic in manner, correct? Nobody's impeding what you're trying to do, correct?
I don't think so. I just got to think. I just got to take the job that they have into consideration, that they're busy also.
Right. Yes.
So
and sometimes people. Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, looking forward to what you have that's backed up when you generate the report. Okay. With that, we'll move on to item number 5, which is the update on the performance auditor recruitment. Since I think I know Stuart and Bob, you've done some work and I will want to review it, but I do think that it's worth also putting in some context that might help guide our discussions after your report as well from the meeting this morning. So we did this, the recommendation that came out of the January audit committee meeting was brought before the executive committee. And unfortunately, we don't have ratification of our particular actions at this point in time. So that's going to slow us down, which is not good, but it is what it is. What the request was from the executive committee membership was to, which was voted on and supported, and it was to go and again have staff collect more information about how other agencies are operating in the area and perhaps in the region in general, and also to come back with a pros cons analysis of the various options that were before them relative to the audit committee's recommendation as well. And that would come before the next executive committee. That one was specifically, so I guess we want to bring it back for the next executive committee meeting on March 17th. So I would expect, I pressed on them with respect to the time sensitivity of this particular activity. And I think that was heard. So that's the good news, is they do understand it. I did acknowledge that we do have new leadership in place, and whenever you have new leadership, this tends to happen, right? So, you can read ill into it, or you can just read what, whenever new leaderships come in, they do tend to want to learn and put their own stamp on things. And that's how I interpret this at this point, which is they want to get a little bit more informed. So I did point out that it is important to keep it moving. It will be brought back before March 17th executive committee meeting. That one is pushed a week because of the Sandag offsite, which is the week before, which is their normal meeting time. And they will be hearing information from staff, and I believe at least at that point in time, expect to make a decision on how they would like to see us move forward and whether or not they're supporting our proposed recommendations at that point. So with that, Stuart, I'll let you at least take it what the subcommittee's been doing.
Yeah, I would propose then we just scrap this, because everything that we have proposed has basically been rendered unachievable. And so it's really not even worth going into.
Okay, that's fine.
But I don't know if Bob.
I was going to ask Bob if he had anything he'd like to add at this point on the work that's been done so far. I mean, I do think never mind, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm just going to kind of side with Stuart here to spend time going over this PowerPoint. We have obviously we have a specific timeline in place. Well, that's kind of just been thrown out the window. I will tell you from just me personally that I'm very concerned, and you spoke to it, Chair Zito, that this has to be kept on we have to keep the pedal, have to keep the foot on the pedal, and get this thing done in a timely fashion. And while I kind of get, the executive committee's argument. Again, that's what this committee has been composed of. I mean, we're charged with hiring the independent auditor through the board's approval. And so, yeah, I kind of agree with Stuart. I think it would be a bit of a waste of our time to go over the PowerPoint unless you wanted to go over the points of what we're thinking and forego the timeline. But again, I'll leave that up to the committee. We can go over what we put together as a recruitment posting for the position. We can certainly do that. But I'll leave that up to you, Chair, and the rest of the committee to decide how we want to go about that.
I appreciate it. Thanks. And any other comments from board members at this point?
I wonder if it's still worth going through it quickly, because for those who are not familiar with the proposal may not understand why, the executive committee's decision to delay the vote on the audit committee, how did it impact this? What are the critical path that we have to make sure that we meet? Is there any way to have a parallel track, continue with, what you're proposing, and assuming the recommendation will be passed? And I mean, I don't know if there's anything that, can be done in parallel.
I don't know. It sounds like, but maybe just clarify. So the executive committee said that the executive committee wants to hear additional information, and that's not going to be until March. And then presumably, is this something that has to go to the full board, or the executive committee is empowered to move it forward?
I'll let Amberlynn answer that one,
Yes, it would need to go to the board after that.
Right, so we're
which
talking
would
about,
be a week later.
okay, so you're coming up to April before there's even a decision about what to do, whether it's to replace Mary or get an outside consulting firm. Mary said that she's basically gone in June. I don't know, other people may have different experiences, but it takes, my understanding, 6 to 8 weeks even to do a procurement process with Sandag. So if sometime late March, you're saying, let's do a procurement process for a firm, or even to do a search firm, you're basically running right up against Mary's leaving before all this stuff happening. It seems to me this is not, for whatever good reasons they may have, this is just not the way we're going to serve the purpose of having a qualified replacement for Mary in that kind of compressed time frame, because then you're in a situation where there's not going to be any overlap for Mary to help get that person up to speed. So I don't want to be like, Debbie Downer here. I'm happy we could go through the PowerPoint. It's to Bob's point, unless Amberlynn wants to read Board Policy 39 for everybody to hear, it seems like one of the core functions of this committee is to engage in that search process, which the board then has the authority to approve or not whatever candidates we bring forward.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just respond with one thing, which is I didn't bother to clarify, but I'm assuming John was correct, the general counsel this morning. And, when it was brought up at the executive committee meeting, and it was kind of curious, but again, I didn't bother to try to clarify or correct at that point in time. But when they asked him what the process was, with respect to moving forward, his answer was that the board, executive committee via the board, was the one who decided the structure of the organization, specifically whether it was internal or external. And then once that's decided, the audit committee was the one that actually ran with that and figured out how to make that happen. I haven't tried to confirm it, but I mean, they certainly understand we have a recommendation and a preference, but my understanding, it is their purview of which way to go, just from the start. So,
Chair Zito?
yeah.
I think Stuart has been generous with the 6 to 8 weeks. And what we've seen so far is 6 to 8 months procurement process.
Well, I guess, I think, Bob, I'll ask you the question, which is, I think you were around the first time, from the time you decided to hire a recruiting, from the experience that we had, and staff may remember too, from the time that was decided to use a recruitment firm to the time that we actually had one working on our behalf. Do you recall how long that was? For the first go around when Mary Kay was
Keep in
hired?
mind that when I came on the committee,
Right.
it had already been decided and they'd already obtained a headhunter
Okay.
firm, if you will. Now, from the time that I think it was Paul Dessart was the previous committee member, and myself started meeting with the firm until we finally found Mary. I believe it was right around 3 to 4 months is what it took.
Okay. And then I think that, relative to the actions that were taken this morning by the executive committee, the one thing that we should ask then, I would presume, is of staff to present to the executive committee as part of their presentation next month what is a reasonable, fastest timeframe that they could bring a firm on board for this recruitment. And so, at that point in time, if, the executive committee were to decide to go one way versus another, and, we could potentially have some points to try to do an internal recruitment, which I assume would be much faster than an external not external consulting firm, an external recruiting firm, which I think their bias is going to be want to go that way. But if it's going to take us 4 months to bring on a firm, then that seems like the consequence is significant that they would have to trade that off.
Chair, I have a clarifying question, if you don't mind. So one of the things that was presented this morning was some amendments and changes to policy number 39, and that dealt with the tenure and selection for the public members. So without that approval moving forward, we are existing on the current role.
Yes.
And so can somebody offer those terminal dates for the public members who are then at that point?
Yeah, regardless of what's decided there, my understanding is that board members Halpern and Monson, based upon our last meeting, their terms end May 15th. That's my recollection. But even if we adopt the board policy 39 changes, that won't apply to their current terms, and they still won't be eligible to reapply yet.
The two public board members who are affecting the recruiting process.
Yes, I know.
So that really is a critical issue, that just extending this out 1 month could be extremely problematic for the selection process, recruitment and selection.
Yeah, well, we were in a funny situation because, I think as you're aware, I was encouraging Ms. Wong Nickerson to try to do it, but we all decided to go the other way because at least at that point, even at this point, we don't know who the board members are for sure until February 24th. Both of us could hypothetically be gone on February 24th as well. So it made more sense for it to be. So if it comes to that, we will have to talk about how we can transition one of the members or both of the members of that. Hopefully we can get a concrete decision out of the next executive committee meeting, and we can get all the way through at least the setup and execution of a recruiting process. But if it doesn't happen, then we will need to adapt and adjust the way, as the time comes. But outside of the time it takes to bring on a firm to do recruiting, I feel there's a good chance we can make good progress still. And that's why I'll be looking to staff as to what we can do to expedite that, and perhaps even work with leadership to try to start processes in that space and make some motion under the assumption that we'll likely want to go that route.
Just real quickly, Mayor, I just want to, for the public record, emphasize that Chair Zito very diplomatically emphasized that point at the executive committee, that there is a time issue and time element, and we do have our public members here who are waiting and willing to work and put the effort in. And the further we push this down the road, the less likely we could have that experience level as far as retention goes to make this work well. So commending the chair for doing that.
Mayor or Vice Chair.
Yes, so we know that time is of the essence and it's an issue. And it wasn't anticipated that this would happen. And so I want to kind of put these questions out there because this was not anticipated. We didn't know that this was going to happen. Is there a way to perhaps institute an extension? One, on behalf of those who are serving right now so that they could facilitate the process of bringing someone on board. And also to extend the time when people can apply to serve on this particular committee. Is it possible?
So extending the terms for existing members would also require an amendment to Board Policy 39, which is essentially already contemplated in the amendments that have been proposed to the Executive Committee.
Yeah, so thanks for the thoughts. I think it's something that we can talk about offline with the leadership, saying, well, can we, perhaps take subsets of the Board Policy 39 pieces and work in some other changes to facilitate this. Although, that's always going to be, even if we manage to do anything, up to the willingness of the board members to continue to participate, the public members. As we all know, this is not necessarily the most rewarding activity all the time, so.
And with that said, maybe taking a look at the existing plan and knowing what the dates are for March, maybe plugging in some anticipated dates on the plan and presenting that and to state that we have a plan moving forward, but we just need these people to be here to implement this might be of value.
Thanks for the thoughts.
And is there a way, as I said, doing parallel track, because Stuart and Bob have already done some work. They know what they have a plan. What we're waiting for is for the executive committee and then the board ultimately to decide, will we go with the hiring another OIPA or using an outside firm, right? So that's to be determined. But until the board make the determination, it doesn't mean that we cannot continue to pursue the OIPA path until the board make the decision. So I don't want us to wait because, time is of the essence, like the mayor has mentioned. And is this something that we have authority to do, or it still have to wait for the board?
So Board Policy 39, as it exists right now, Section 3.1.4, says that the board first will provide direction regarding whether to hire an individual or a firm, and then the audit committee makes its recommendation on which firm or person to hire. So while there's quite a bit of prep work that the audit committee could do in the anticipation that the board may choose to move forward with an individual, that work can continue to be done. There may be some limitations around entering into contracts, for instance, with like a search firm, an executive search firm, until we do get authority from the board of some kind, but there's still some additional work that can continue to be done.
So can I just interject? There have been a variety of issues in the past number of years in which, let's just be blunt, there are some questions of credibility surrounding Sandag. How this is going to appear is that when the board first reviewed compliance with AB 805, the board, as Bob mentioned, even before there was an audit committee, the board decided to hire an internal person and create this internal office. I would venture to say this system has been working pretty well despite the inconvenience of findings that are not necessarily always complimentary and have been controversial and caused some grief. But there have been important findings that will better the agency and protect the taxpayers' money. And I think everybody believes in those goals. I guess when we, as a committee, with different points of view on various topics, political and otherwise, came together to unanimously recommend to the board that they maintain this function in its form that has been working well. I guess I naively believed that a board, especially a new board who doesn't have the kind of background in this particular domain, would actually pay some heed to the advice of the committee that's charged to provide advice. Because what we advised is for them to, in fact, continue the policy that a prior board had implemented. And so I just think that this is going to play so poorly in the public domain, not the least of which is, I recognize that there probably are many who wish that this whole audit committee and IPA would just kind of, be less of a pain in the butt. But if you believe in this function, how do you expect to attract serious people like, Agnes is the CFO of SDS. You don't think she's got a lot going on in her life? How do you expect to attract serious people when it becomes clear that the board seems to not really pay much attention to the well-intentioned and professional judgment of the advice of its audit committee members. I think that's a problem. Now, maybe that's a problem that's above the pay grade of this committee, but I just feel it's important for people to recognize the ramification of what's going on here.
Do you think the executive committee, when they asked to have more time to make the determination, do you think they fully understand what the ramification is in terms of this recruiting?
So maybe. I mean, I certainly did my best, as Ed pointed out, to make sure that they were clear on the ramifications. I mean, I would expect they would disagree with a lot of what Board Member Halpern just said, just saying that they, as outlined by Amberlyn, they one of the well, I say every leader has their own North Star way that they like to operate, and one of the ones that Chair Vargas at this point has been very clear about is that she's a stickler for wanting to follow what the current rules and policies are, and she feels very clearly that that is the board's responsibility to make the decision on how, informed by the audit committee and the executive committee, on how the structure should be set up and how it should be executed going forward. And she feels like it's her job as the chair to take that input and make a decision. I think even Vice Chair put out a couple of very good questions to staff saying, can you at least elaborate on what this delay means from the perspective, is it going to add risk? And staff responded, as you might expect, with a balanced approach, saying, well, yes, it'll add risk on this timeline aspect, but it may reduce risk by letting you make a more informed decision. So that was what they were presented with by staff perspective. And so there is a very notable risk that this could drag out for a long time. That's what I brought up, and I'm going to do my best to make sure that doesn't happen, and continuing to keep the pressure on, because none of us want that to happen. And so I think, the best thing that we can do is make sure that we're doing everything that we can to facilitate it working as quickly as possible. Once they've made a decision that they are comfortable with. And, I'm hopeful that, as you said, unanimous decision on our part, decision by the board in a previous part, but to move forward with the model that we have, that they'll take that and that'll be the way that we go. I think, one of the challenges is this is the first opportunity they have as a board to revisit that model, right? So they're saying, hey, the current IPA is leaving. This is our first opportunity to take a look. There are certainly certain things that haven't gone well that they may or may not be attributing to this particular model that they may want to take a look at. And, I don't like it, but I'll respect that and let them take their month to figure that out, even though it is adding notable risk on our side. I also want to say that I did speak reasonably about the value of the team that we have, and that we want to make sure that we're keeping this team, and I don't want to put that at risk. And of course, having chaos at a leadership level always puts risk at what's going on underneath. So I'm hopeful, that we're out there advocating for you, and that we really want to make sure you guys stay on board and do the good work that you're doing. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that this is what continues, because it's important to me and it's important to this whole group here. So I just want to make sure you hear that and know that we're there, because this is something that I think is the best interest of the organization. Board Member Halpern, you point out, it's definitely the best interest of the organization from my perspective, but it's kind of up to us to convince the board of that. So along those lines, I think, the question becomes, what can we do to try to mitigate the effects of the the executive committee decision that was made. One thing I would think that would be useful from a subcommittee perspective is, even though it feels painful and unnecessary, is perhaps a deeper exploration of information that you could create. And I'll be doing my own, but I don't want to do Brown Act violations, that you could then provide to staff and the executive committee to help inform them on this decision. I mean, we made a recommendation, right? But the recommendation was just based upon our experience, as opposed to, okay, these are the concrete points. The points that I was able to come up with was, we believe from our experience, it'll be significantly more expensive to go outside. It will be significantly less efficient, and we'll lose all of the, particularly if we'll lose all of the learned knowledge that the in-house team has with respect to doing the continual auditing and the other benefits that we have that are going to make this agency better. So if you two are willing, having work done like that, would be ready for the March 17th discussion would be very helpful. And as I said, I'm going to go do my own investigation as well. Second, hopefully, we can, if staff can provide some feedback offline with respect to what it looks like to bring an agency on board, maybe we can start making progress on getting the legwork done for that as well. But I don't, if we're going to use a recruiting agency, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if we have staff here to help us out on what that would look like, how far we could go, how much we could get done. But at least thinking about, getting that prep work started so it doesn't take 4 months, because you said 4 months isn't acceptable. We need to have a faster process than that. Thoughts? Yeah,
just a point of, from my own clarification. So what we're talking about as far as the executive committee is concerned, the decision that they're having to make, besides all the other detail of 39 that was discussed, in particular as it relates to the independent performance auditor, the decision for the executive committee and therefore the board is, do we hire an individual or do we go outside and bring an outside firm in to act as the independent performance auditor? Is that kind of what we're saying here?
Yeah, I could see two things that would help inform them and provide some information to the group would be, one, that pros and cons that was specifically asked for. I mean, that was actually specifically asked for, was a pros and cons of having an internally staffed team versus an outside firm.
Can I explain something a little bit? I just kind of wanted to provide some background, just some clarity. If I'm understanding correctly, the second option about hiring a firm involves a recruitment process, a formal like RFP process, okay? If we are doing that in-house, what Lloyd was explaining was that that process would take 6 to 8 months. The current process, months. Sometimes as long as a year. I mean, an expedited process. I mean,
So you're talking about actually hiring a firm,
yes,
to take the role of doing the work,
yes,
as opposed to hiring a firm to do a recruitment.
Yes. So that's what I want to
make sure we're
make
clear
sure
on here,
everyone understands. I'm not sure what it seems. I'm not sure if everyone's talking about the same thing. But so I just want to be
at this point we are. But thanks for that clarification.
Okay.
That's very helpful, Crystal. So the point being that Lloyd earlier made a comment that it takes, up to 8 months to hire a firm. And that is very valid, which is if we were to hire a firm to fulfill the role of the IPA, that would almost certainly take us 8 months to do. If we were to, I don't know that means how much faster it is to hire a firm to do the recruitment process. But so I don't think that really changes any of the comments you were making, Board Member Monson, but feel free to jump in again.
Just, I mean, if we're looking for pros and cons related to whether we hire somebody, an individual or not, to be presented to the executive, I know that the Association of Local Government Auditors, they've done a huge study on the pros and cons of that as it relates to independence and the ability to operate an independent audit function. They've done that. The Institute of Internal Auditors has also done. So I can certainly get those studies and pass them on to you that if you would like, or
I would love that. I would suggest that what I would love even more is your summary of that information with it backed up, as well as Stuart's, just saying, you know, this is how we interpret what this has found. So I don't just want that. I want our interpretation with your background and your background informing how that applies to Sandag.
okay.
That'd be great.
And as part of that, can we invite the chair to come to our next meeting so we can have this discussion? Because my presumption is that even in an executive committee meeting, they probably, you know, well, certainly you don't have, and I'll make an exception, I'm not talking about me. You don't have the wealth of experience of these people in the room, with no disrespect to you and your presentation. But I think it might be a constructive thing if we actually had the chair come and we can talk about it.
I can certainly try. I will just point out that our next meeting, which I haven't gotten to yet, will actually be delayed a little bit time-wise, because that is the same day as the final day of the board offsite. So it's possible there will be preoccupations, but also we can certainly extend the invite for her to attend. Any other comments or questions? So yeah, so from my perspective, you know, from the subcommittee, what the subcommittee is working on. And again, just, you know, personally, what would help me out a lot is what we just described, which is that decision. The other one, which is that they would likely be providing some guidance on, is just thoughts. I don't know if our experience is a salient here, but if you want to provide some thoughts on the benefits versus issues of using an external recruiting firm versus in-house staff time to recruit an IPA replacement, that could be useful as well. And then last, as I said, any material that we could create, working with a positive mindset that we're going to be looking to replace Mary Kay, that would be helpful as well. And I know you've already got a first draft of that. I don't know if anyone else wants to look at it today. My primary feedback is that I think we need to run it through a, you know, if we use that, we're going to need to use at least staff or a firm to run it through a marketing gloss up. And we want to make Sandag look sexy too, right? So we need to run it up through, just like, here, apply for this job, this is what we want, and get that marketing stuff put together. And just from my perspective, a section that would be very useful as well is just a typical section around leadership attributes of, you know, running teams and showing that kind of stuff as well. But I, you know, very much thank you for getting that first draft out there. That's very helpful. But I'm trying to think of what some examples of language that I've seen in other places are just like, you know, a proven leader who's able to influence people and decisions across multiple functions and areas of expertise, and just that kind of leadership stuff, running teams, and largely just from the perspective of making sure, which they shouldn't be surprised that when they come in and do their interviews, and, you know, they're going to get questions that say, tell me stories about how you did this. And so if it's on the bullet point, you can at least say, well, you should have known it's on the bullet points. We're going to be looking for stories in that space. Yeah, Bob.
Those are great comments, Chair. And again, when Stuart and I came up with this, we were, having sat on the last time with the outside firm, they came up with the 6-page brochure,
right,
of things that, frankly, and both Stuart and I agreed that if I'm a candidate, I'm going to get lost in the reading, if you will. So we tried to kind of reduce this, understanding that there are probably some things we could probably add to that. So your comment, yeah, okay, we could add something.
Yeah, that was my 2 points of feedback, which was add a little bit more about just the, you know, as I said, the team and organization leadership parts, just so they have that in their mindset. And then also we should do something that more effectively sells Sandag, just from the perspective of making it look like a fun place to be. And I don't think that's your job. I just think that's, you know, whenever that material gets put into it, whether it needs to be 6 pages, yeah, I would assume that's not the case. I think the last time I did a city manager recruitment, it was 4 pages. And so I think 2 or 3 is probably even enough, but at least doing a job of selling the organization is helpful too. And very much appreciate what's been done so far. So thanks for that. Other comments or questions?
Question.
Yes, Lloyd.
If an external firm is decided, what will happen to the OIP's office?
That's not something, I mean, that's not something I can answer. That's something you need to run up through management internally. But again, very hopeful that's not going to be the case, but clearly I can't make any promises.
In addition, if you decide to do an external IPA, would that person be directing our office? And how would that guarantee me that that IPA will tell me that I'm doing the job correctly?
So once again, it's difficult to answer questions in a vacuum. And this, what you're asking right now is exactly what I pointed out as risks to the committee this morning, once you start opening things up, these types of questions. And I think those are better questions for you to approach through internal management. I can tell you what, the preference of this committee, my personal preference is that we keep going and doing the things that we're doing. That's what I will be fighting for. Okay.
I'm also curious, I mean, have examples of organizations similar to SANDAG that has used an outside firm to perform internal audit functions?
That was one of the questions the executive committee asked to be brought back. Was specifically how other organizations that look like SANDAG do this. Unfortunately, I wasn't involved 5 years ago when this went through the first time, so I'm assuming that was done already.
There probably aren't too many other organizations like SANDAG who had the inciting incidents that led to AB 805 and the creation of the audit committee and the internal auditor. One is, in a sense, the city of San Diego. If you go back a dozen or so years, and I'm not sure, Mayor Vasquez is probably too young, she wasn't working at the city at that time, but the city of San Diego had some very serious financial trouble, and that led to the creation of its independent audit function and the independent audit committee. Much of this is based on that model. And so I think you can't just look at what agencies have a quote unquote internal audit function. I mean, Ray could correct me or other staff members, SANDAG had an internal audit function for years. I don't know how long Steve and that office existed, but there was an internal audit function. What we're talking about is an independent audit function. And as you know, when we were going through looking for salary comps, there actually are not a lot of those in general anyway. So to the extent anybody's doing the work on that, I would just strongly advise you to not look at internal audit functions as relevant to this model. Does that distinction resonate with people though?
I think it's a very valid point of feedback, and I don't know if Amberlyn or Ray, either one of you can take that back to whoever's working on the executive committee's action item.
We'll take that back, and I think I understand the distinction between an internal auditor and an independent audit office, which is, I think, what you're trying to make. So I'll take that back.
I have to say, it's interesting. I've always thought internal audit are supposed to be independent. So there's such internal audit function that are not independent. So that's an interesting concept.
Well, again, I'm not trying to slam the people who were in that office, but again, SANDAG had an internal audit function for years, and they didn't come close to finding any of the revelations that have been found in the past 4 years. So,
Point well taken.
and also, nor did any of the external financial auditors or performance auditors. And SANDAG has had many layers of those people. There are financial audits of SANDAG, there are financial audits of the Transnet program, there are performance audits of the Transnet program, there are performance audits of SANDAG. None of these auditors, external auditors, have found any of the things that this team and Mary have uncovered over the past few years. And I recognize the inconvenience of some of these things coming out. But if the goal is protecting the credibility of the agency and the taxpayer, it seems like these are
Yeah,
important
I think
findings.
the point that you've made is valid, which is making sure that it is, that we do have comparisons with other independent auditing functions. Just from my personal experience, most of what you're talking about is usually a significant factor of just how deep you dig. And that's the benefit of what we've done so far. And that's the benefit of having the team on board, is that we can dig deep enough to find some meaningful things that need to be changed. Okay, so with that, I see nothing. Oh, I don't think I ever asked if we had any speakers, but I'm assuming the answer is still the same. No public speakers on this item?
No, we do not have any public
Okay,
speakers.
should have asked that earlier. So with that, we move to upcoming meetings. It's not necessarily official yet. I do believe, though, the next audit committee meeting will be Friday, March 10th at 1:30 p.m. in order to give time for those who have to travel back from the Sandag offset time to get here and perhaps eat a little bit of lunch. So with that, we are adjourned, and thank you, everybody, for coming on down.